You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast produced by Veteran Strategies and featuring conversations with fascinating and impactful men and women who have shaped our world, our communities, and our history. My name is Robert Vane, Principal of Veteran Strategies, and your host for our discussion. You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Gahl Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and NFP, a national insurance broker with strong local content. Our podcast is featured on the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact Chris Spangle or me at leadersandlegends.net. And as always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. Thank you for joining us on the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is the man, the bulldog, the legend, the hare, Chris Gahl. Thank you so much, Chris, for coming on the podcast.
Robert, as a longtime listener, appreciate you having me on. More than 280 episodes, and I as a steward of Indianapolis, Indiana, I enjoy listening to the history and the present day and all the topics you cover, so it's an honor to be on.
You just preempted my introduction of you as probably the nicest person I've ever met.
Well, thank you.
You're a terrific, terrific person.
Thank you.
Chris is the Executive Vice President, Chief Marketing Officer of Visit Indy. He directs the organization's strategic marketing, communications, community engagement, government relations, and partnership development. In other words, all the things that Bill Benner couldn't do. He has been there for 18 years.
That's right. 18 years. Proud of that fact.
He was recently named an Indiana 250 business leader by the Indianapolis Business Journal and participated in the Stanley K. Lacey Leadership Program. Were you 40 under 40 too?
I was.
Or 40 under 40 also?
Yes.
He holds a degree in communications from
Butler University,
where he also sits on the university's board of trustees. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the Leaders and Legends podcast.
Absolutely.
You are a true Hoosier success story.
Thank you.
Someone who, through hard work and skill and the ability to get along, has risen really to incredible heights here in the city and beyond. It's the last of these I want to ask you about, if that's okay. You work at a quasi-governmental agency. Is that what you'd call it?
That's fair.
Which means you have to navigate politics and you have to navigate personalities. And yet you've been there through 3 different mayors of 2 different parties and lots of changes. How do you navigate that, especially in today's world where partisanship is seemingly everything?
That's a great question.
Because honestly, I tell you, I don't know if I've known you for 20 years or so. I don't know if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Don't care, but I honestly don't know.
And it's interesting because we are Visit Indy is a nonprofit. 90% of our funding comes from the Capital Improvement Board, so tourism tax. The other 10% from restaurants, museums, hotels that pay into us marketing and selling Indianapolis. We're the tourism agency. And I always say we're not a D, we're not an R, we're an I, and the I stands for what's best for Indy. And so that's the mentality we have when we head into work, is that decisions we make, stands we take as a nonprofit need to be Indianapolis focused and first. And it's not always that easy, but that's the mentality we have heading into what I call government relations, government affairs. And if something starts impacting our ability to sell and market Indianapolis, to drive sports tourism or convention tourism, or people from Chicago or Louisville wanting to get in their car and come here, then we have to raise our hand and we have to look at both sides of Market Street and say, this is impacting men and women who depend on tourism for a paycheck. So we're going to take a stance, or we need to worry about that. And that's the lens that we have within our walls.
How do you navigate controversy without becoming controversial yourself? And by you, I mean Visit Indy?
Yeah. We always let the customer or the visitor speak for us. So if an issue starts bubbling up, certainly probably the most recent would be actually abortion bans nationwide. You think about women 28 to 42 are the majority who make decisions on where meetings are held. And when we started hearing from some of our customers, we went very statistically to share with the Indiana General Assembly on what we're hearing, not the stance we're taking, but what we're hearing from those who book meetings and conventions. So we let the data lead, and we let the visitor voice lead on what we're hearing and try to stay out of the weeds.
I thought you were going to take me back to a particularly glorious period in my career, but since you didn't, because you're so nice.
That's right.
Then I'll do it.
Yeah.
RFRA.
Sure.
That's probably, I was working for Governor Pence at the time. That's probably the most explosive example of a controversial issue starting to bleed into other things.
Yeah.
What was that time period like? We're talking the spring of 2015. And it became national news. I was certainly aware of the calls you were getting, Visit Indy, and the complaints and the threats, if that's the right term.
Sure.
If you don't do something, we ain't coming there, basically. As a PR person and a policy expert, how was that to navigate? Because it was real.
Yeah. Thanks. It's part of my career that I look back on, and it's crisis oriented, right? So a bill drops, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and immediately is polarizing, and it's taken and put forth a week ahead of hosting the NCAA men's basketball tournament, Final Four, I should say. And so we just started getting calls from some of our annual conventions and meetings. And, hey, we're tracking this. What's going on? And we've been watching it, but not overly concerned, if I'm being honest. And so when things started piling up, and companies were threatening not to do business here, and conventions and sporting events were saying we're not visiting anymore, and the foundation block of our brand, being hospitable, was under attack. It was real, and it impacted us in a real way. We did end up losing convention business, about $60 million over a 4 or 5 year period, and about 1 billion negative social media and media impressions about us not being a welcoming place. And so we had to push back, and we did that in a consensus building way, and letting the data, again, this is what the visitor is saying, this is what the C-suite is saying about us. And it was hard because the aisle wasn't set as firmly as you might think on that issue. And so we were trying to navigate that in real time. And from Governor Pence to Mayor Ballard, both ends of Market Street, listening and learning.
It really blew up when George Takei took notice of it on social media. And it was really the first time in my PR career where I noticed that social media it would be an understatement to say it made a difference. It exploded it, and it became a worldwide issue instead of just what was happening in a particular industry. Was that something that you experienced for the first time, where social media really drove the discussion?
In a negative light, yes. Not in a positive light. We had started tracking what we'd call social media influence on our city and how we're thought of and discussed in social media platforms ahead of 2015 in this. Yet this would be the first real example, a tangible example to your question, on a negative piece of news being put into light and exploding and running and snagging and leaping across channels and across platforms and building steam and building likes and going viral, if you will. And that was hard to put your arms around. And we are in the infancy of social media marketing as a whole, and how to respond and when not to respond. And so that was a big test for us in our social media muscle.
Is it your opinion that the state, you mentioned the abortion legislation of a few years ago, the state and the city have taken notice of RFRA and the RFRA firestorm and are not necessarily less likely, but less inclined to wade into those sort of things, or at least they take the reaction into an account?
Yes, I think so. I think in every major city has a tourism agency, the Visit Indy, if you will. And when we go to conferences and talk about what keeps us up at night in terms of driving tourism to our respective cities, social issues bubbles to the top. Again, it's polarizing and it's real, and the social issues grow. And so therefore, every city in the nation is thinking about how you respond to questions about social issues in your own community, because we know it's part of the process and how people decide where to hold major sporting events and conventions and conferences and trade shows, domestic versus international. And so we've spent a lot of time with the Indiana General Assembly, with the City County Council, sharing real time what we're hearing and what issues, not only in Indianapolis, Indiana, but other cities and states are bubbling up. And we do that because we ultimately care.
And not to put you on the spot, because I'm not trying to do that, but you also are in a situation, or have been in a situation, and I only know this because we've worked together so many times, where you have to defend a convention. And I can speak only to the NRA that came a few years ago. There was a lot of controversy about this organization coming. And I was very impressed by, I'm not a member of the NRA, so if they come here, if they don't, I don't think they're the Hades incarnate like a lot of folks do. But setting that aside, you all did a wonderful job of saying, we want them here. How tough is it when the actual convention causes a little bit of controversy or a negative attention?
And certainly NRA is probably the most recent emblematic of that polarizing group. And if you say Indy welcomes all, then, and that was our mantra during RIFRA, then how do you be selective in that welcoming? It's hard for me. I've been personally impacted by gun violence. My dad was murdered in Fountain Square in 1986 by someone who was not mentally well. He was a federal probation officer killed in the line of duty. And so I've been personally impacted by gun violence here in our city. And so I have to be able to suspend my personal beliefs in guns or right to bear arms to say, is this a conference that actually fills up our convention center? Yes. Our hotels? Yes. Visitors come and invest in our city. And again, I have to be able to suspend my own thoughts around being impacted by mental health, illegally getting a gun and killing my dad in the line of duty here in Indianapolis, and be able to then turn and say, welcome, and be authentic in that.
You're listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer of Visit Indy, Chris Gahl. Were you born in Indianapolis?
Born in Indianapolis, 38th and Kessler, so that's Pike Township.
On the street?
I was born St. Vincent's Hospital, the OG St. V's. And
did you go to Pike High School?
I did. I'm a Pike Red Devil.
Did you go with Solari? Michael Solari?
Mike is a little younger, and our governor's a little bit older.
I was going to say your governor's, because he's class of 80. Holcomb's 6 months older than I am.
Yeah, he and I played for the same basketball coach, Ed Siegel, at different times, and both credit him as a mentor, our basketball coach, who ended his career a few years after I hung it up. But yeah, Pike really shaped me in so many ways, and then I went on to Butler University. I didn't go too far. I wanted to stay a little closer to home because my mom and brother were there, and it felt like the right move. And from Butler, I then went, my mom's side has ties to Hawaii. And so as a kid, grew up going to Hawaii, spending time in Hawaii, and got offered a job in destination marketing in Hawaii. So I spent a couple of years there with my wife, Catherine, and then we decided it's time to come back and start a family. So we moved back to Indy in 2005, and I just wanted to stay in tourism. Hawaii's gross domestic product is largely dependent on tourism. And so I've always been interested in like why people travel, what they leave behind, how they influence. So I came back to Indy in 2005, and I'm like, I want to stay in tourism. And Visit Indy had a job, and longtime sports columnist and a mentor of mine, Bill Benner, he and I started the exact same day in October of 2005. And it was a pleasure to work with him and alongside him and learn from him and other skilled communicators like Bob Schultz, and have grown up there at Visit Indy. And now it's my 19th year. From Hawaii tourism to Indianapolis tourism. And both are competitive. Both have positives and negatives. And in both cases, you got to understand your brand to understand how to drive people to your destination.
You have two separate places, two separate set of attractions. So it's often said of Indianapolis, we don't have the ocean, we don't have the mountains, so on and so forth. But we have lots of other things. So thinking about, I would imagine, other than maybe the travel, is it difficult to get people to come to Hawaii?
It is. And people were like, wow, what do you mean there's no way? There are 8 major Hawaiian islands, and so the islands compete with themselves. Maui versus Kauai versus the Big Island versus Oahu. But then if people are saving up to take that long haul, they might also be visiting Tahiti or Samoa or Fiji. They might be going to Australia for a long haul, once in a lifetime trip. So Hawaii does compete viciously for tourism, and it's a long haul. You got to want to get there, right? It's the most remote landmass in the world. And then you come to Indy, and often seen as an underdog, but the convention facilities and the hotel package and the sports brand, we're going head to head with Nashville and Austin and Chicago and Denver. We just won a convention for 2036 against Orlando. We beat them. And people are like, wow, Indy over Orlando, but that's the arena we are now in as a city. And so it's just as competitive as I've seen both sides of the tourism arena.
You mentioned a few people a couple of minutes ago, mentor, and how important your mother must have been as a mentor. And here at the podcast, we're very sorry about your father.
Yeah, thank you.
I did not know that story.
He was a Marine too,
a few minutes ago. So was my mother and father.
Yeah,
so I'm sure he stood up for himself. God love him.
Yeah.
But mentorship, you and I'm a little bit, what am I, like 15 years older than you maybe?
Yeah.
I'm 56.
I'm 46 decades.
Okay, so 10 years. So with this, we had probably like maybe the same mentors in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
How important were those mentors to you? You mentioned the incomparable Bill Benner, our great friend, and Mr. Hoosier for sure.
Yeah.
But now we're in the position to mentor.
Yep.
And talk to me, please, in the Leaders and Legends podcast audience about what you learned and what you try to teach.
Great question, Robert. I think servant leadership comes to mind. This idea of I've it seems odd, but I've been fascinated with studying servant leadership and what are the key tenets, and talking with others about what that means. And what I think also is important, and I've benefited from, and others in Indianapolis, is multi-generational mentorship. This is the idea that men and women 2 or 3 decades older than us have taken and continue to take the time to mentor us. And so therefore it's incumbent on us to mentor down 2 or 3 decades to make sure that we're lifting up those and pulling them up the Indy ladder, if you will. And so I don't think that exists in a real tangible way in other cities as organically and authentically. I think we're small enough that it can happen, and boardrooms are opened and board seats are available and people are accessible like you, and make the time for people. And I'm just reminded that, again, like you have to go up and down the mentorship ladder, and it happens in a real way. And it's multi-generational and multi-gender.
Sure.
And how neat that is to have it in the broader Indy community.
We just, in the last month, by the time this podcast is posted in October, we will have been about 6 to 8 weeks away from the loss of Jim Morris.
Sure.
Who is certainly if you are constructing a Mount Rushmore of non-government leaders who have made a difference, transformed Indiana, or Indianapolis especially, Jim's on that. He's on that side of that mountain. How well did you know him, and what was his effect on your career, and how you not sold Indy, but how you absorbed Indianapolis as you go out and talk about how great it is, which is something that he did for 50 plus years?
Jim, we faith shared, we Indy shared. He was one of the first to come when he returned back to Indianapolis as a past chairman of Visit Indy's board and on our board to help understand how we were positioning the city and making recommendations on talking more favorably about our city and not coming from a position of weakness. He was someone that just epitomized encouragement and consensus building and being present in every moment, the consummate connector of people. And so I valued him and his mentorship from the professional side. And then on the personal side, in 2018, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. And he heard about it, and he called me and he said, "May I help put you in touch with Dr. Larry Einhorn?" And I said, "Thank you, absolutely." And he helped me get in to see arguably the world's leading oncologist for this type of cancer here at IU Health. That is one of many examples of Jim proactively reaching out, taking the time to help me when he didn't need to, when he's very busy. And so I got a chance to see his wife, Jackie, a few days ago and just express how sad I am, but how fortunate I am, and how all of us have been that he helped shape us in the city.
Our condolences and thoughts and love certainly go out to Jackie Morris. Growing up in Indianapolis, as you have, and as I did, the transformation, the change in so many ways is visual. What are some of your memories growing up in Indianapolis? So I'm guessing you're born in 77?
Got it.
So you came of age about the time that the Pan Am Games were coming and the Colts were already here. And so maybe what you witnessed wasn't as drastic as someone like me who remembered only coming downtown to see Dick the Bruiser because there was nothing else to do.
Who lived around the corner from me.
Oh, yeah. Did you go to the same church?
He, at one point, we were worshiping the same place, and then he split up. But yeah, Dick the Bruiser.
I remember Jim Morris saying that Dick the Bruiser went to a Presbyterian school or church. How do you rate Indianapolis's growth, change, especially when you compare it to other cities that are really, in a lot of ways, coming in our wake? I'm thinking particularly of Nashville.
Yeah. Cities compete for talent, for tourism. I would give Indianapolis, Indiana, 7.5 out of 10 right now. I think we are being very deliberate and exceptional in where we're placemaking and how many cranes we have in the air for what construction projects and where within our city. I think we've done an exceptional job thinking about cleaning up the White River to have better activation along the White River. I think we've successfully retained some of the key events and institutions that call Indianapolis home. And I think where we have room to grow is with our residents not being so humbly apologetic about our city. No other city, I think, of our caliber and stature is apologetic. And if you and I and Alan travel and we go to New York and we're sitting around a hotel lobby and someone's like, where are you from? And someone's, I'm from Denver. And where are you from? I'm from LA. Where are you from? I'm from Austin. Where are you from? And most people are like, oh, I'm from Indianapolis. It's like south of Chicago. So we're a city. We don't have to apologize about it. And if our residents, our biggest brand ambassadors, aren't as vocal and humbly boastful about our city, it impacts the overall brand and who wants to meet here, but who wants to live here and do business here. And so that's where we need to grow. It's not cranes in the air physically grow. It's more like emotionally growing as a community.
When you say Indianapolis is the first response, the 500.
Yes. All of our research for 19 years, almost 20 years. If you've never been here and you're asked to describe Indianapolis, Indy 500, Colts, and Pacers, in that order, almost relentlessly. If you've been here and we ask, what do you think of Indianapolis? It's surprise, clean, safe, culinary, sports, walkable. Those are the words used to describe Indianapolis. And so we'll take them, and then we got to build on them. The unexpected is how many people, it's nauseating to think how many people have come here and said, boy, I never would have thought. And if you think about it, it's a backhanded compliment.
Sure.
I would have,
especially where they're coming. You never know if they're coming. They're coming from New York and they're impressed. Then you're like, okay, we've done something good.
But if the expectation is so low that a visitor comes and they continue to say, I never thought Indy was this cool or hip or cultured, then that expectation bar is low. Now, I was talking with a colleague. We said, do we ever want to arrive? So I ask you, should Indy ever arrive? Like some cities say, we have arrived. I don't want to ever arrive. I don't think we should ever arrive. We should always be evolving. Do you? I mean, like, I don't want to ever be like, Indy's arrived. I think that's so, then where do you go from there?
I would say, to use a little bit of East Side background, Indianapolis should always have a chip on its shoulder.
I like that.
It's done big events better than anyone else. And that's not us talking. That's sportscasters talk about it all the time. Famously, a few years ago, Mike Greenberg from Mike and Mike at the time said Indy is the best big game city in America.
Yeah.
But there's a saying, you should remain stable but never stand still.
Yeah, I like that.
And because we do big things so well, we have a reputation of, we put on the entire NCAA tournament. And I saw Ryan Vaughn in the middle of that, who was head of the sports corp, obviously a terrific leader in his own right. In the morning of the championship game, we were working out.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, don't you have something better to do? He goes, city's got it covered.
Yeah.
We got 5,000 volunteers. We got this great staff.
Of course, he's the architect for understanding all these hotels connecting into the convention center and why that was a existing bubble. So it's neat that someone like Ryan could voice that idea and get it done.
Is that what you hear when you travel? You mentioned it a few minutes ago, but not necessarily from a tourism perspective. I went there for 3 days with my family, but more of like, I was there for a convention. And if they ever ask me where we should go for a convention again, How satisfying is it to hear that? Because we have some significant conventions that have been here, or events, for lack of a better term, including the Combine,
Sure.
which I know is very much a target.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you about Gen Con in a second, but we've had some significant conventions that you think, let's go someplace else for a while. People like variety, but that just doesn't seem to happen here.
Yeah. We have a time-tested list of annual conventions that stay with us, and they haven't changed cities, and that's an anomaly. It's hard to keep an annual convention of the firefighter convention, FDIC, based out of New York.
Especially now that Jonesy's is closed.
That's right.
I thought for sure it was going to
That's right.
leave.
People love the fire person convention, and cities are courting them daily. And we have kept them safe and sound and growing in Indianapolis for nearly 30 years. That takes up a big chunk of our convention calendar, these annual conventions like National FFA and the Fire Department Instructors Conference and others, yet we're winning more business than we lose.
It's the racing performance one or whatever.
PRI, performance racing.
That's massive.
That trade show every December is growing. International trade show. We're stealing conventions from Chicago and Nashville and Detroit and Orlando and New York and San Antonio. And when people, seeing is believing. If we can get a decision maker, sports, medical, doesn't matter, any genre or segment, if they come and walk our city, and they see how we're laid out, we have about a 35 to 38% ratio of booking. And that might seem low for those listening. That's actually extremely high.
What's average?
Oh, if you could get 15 to 18, maybe 20% in some of these cities. But seeing is believing. If you look, you book. And that's Indy. So when we look at our sales and marketing as a city, on behalf of our city, we have to get that person on a train, plane, automobile to Indy. Check them into a hotel. And by the way, in any given week, we probably have 5 or 6 site inspections. People are kicking the tires for Indy and then going on to another city and another city. We're in a final 3, final 4, and they're going to make their decision and vote on it as a board for 2035, 2036, 2037. And so it's very gratifying when we beat out these other major cities and we know we came to play and we won.
That's something I didn't understand until I went to go work for Mayor Ballard, is how far out these conventions are booked. And is there a certain point, however, where you as an executive staff with Leonard Hoops, who's CEO, is that his? Leonard Hoops. Leonard, if you're listening to this, I'm just going to tell you so married up. I can't even articulate it.
Neither can I.
Is there a certain point, however, where you're like, we just can't give them any more?
Yeah.
We're going to have to just let them walk away because they're starting to want too much. How painful is that?
That's hard because in some cases, it's harder to retain a customer than attract a new. And so is the city progressing and getting bigger and stronger and better? And in some of the case, like we have physical space limitations, and then you have emotional limitations where convention organizers need more, are being courted by other major cities with more incentives and more dollars and more cents and bigger pots of money to come there. And by definition, a trade show or a meeting or a convention is a profit-producing function of an association or a corporation. They bring large amounts of people together for a finite time with selling trade shows and sponsorships and attendee registration. They have to make money, and we want them to do that in Indianapolis, and sometimes their bylaws require it to meet annually or biannually, and so we play by their rules, but it's getting more and more competitive.
You're listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Gahl Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, and the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn. Our guest today is Chris Gahl. He is the Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for Visit Indy. Chris, is there a particular Hoosier leader or legend you admire most? And while you're thinking, you can't say Mitch Daniels and you can't say Jim Morris.
Okay.
I've retired those two people because they just get named right after each other.
I want to share, boy, that's a great question. I should have expected. I want to share that I believe David Letterman has embodies so much of why we're good and the Hoosierism that I admire. And he has fallen back in love with our city in more recent years and comes back more routinely and is checking out Caitlin Clark games and not just coming for the Indy 500 and bringing his son to dine at some of the restaurants like he did when he was here. I also really admire Alelia Bundles, the great-granddaughter of Madam C.J. Walker, who spends an enormous amount of time, effort, and energy here in Indianapolis carrying on the theater's legacy and her great-grandmother's legacy. And the third person that comes to mind is Deputy Mayor Judy Thomas. Judy Thomas and I used to work together at Visit Indy. She's now over neighborhoods for Mayor Hogsett. She's also a Butler grad and serves with me at the trusteeship. She's a confidant, she's a mentor, she's a tormentor, she gives it to me straight, and she's someone who I count on for real talk and real feedback, and I admire her in so many ways, and she is so cultured and traveled and understands this 360 views. Those are the three people, Letterman, Lilia Bundles, and then Judy Thomas, who I count on, some closer than others, and then depend on them and love them for who they are.
We've had several people on the podcast who have at least a tangential and sometimes a direct role in tourism and hospitality. One of my first interviews was with Ryan Vaughn.
Yeah.
David Frick, who's the greatest citizen of Indianapolis most of you have never heard of.
Yeah,
Indianapolis would look so different if it wasn't for David Frick. There is an argument against the way Indianapolis has and continues to market itself, prioritize its dollars with regard to spending, the quote unquote. If you live in Indianapolis, you think downtown gets everything.
Right.
If you live outstate, you think Indianapolis gets everything. Neither is true. Both are donors. They're not takers.
That's right.
How do you blunt that argument? How do you say, look, yeah, we could spend another $150 million on potholes, but here's why we spend the money the way we do?
Great question. So 42 to 45% of those who visit our state annually come to the capital city. And so when you start from that perspective, that the sheer volume of people arriving to explore our state come to the capital city, that's a helpful kind of starting point when you're talking to someone who might live north, south, east, or west. So to have a thriving capital city, not just the downtown, but the Marion County as a whole is important because it's where many are thinking about not only visiting, but living and working and playing. And I think we've done a better job recently, led by the Chamber and the State House, to think regionally, that we need to think about the 9-county region in particular and how we work together and approach issues and opportunities together. But public safety, tourism tax, and I always remind our state elected officials, is that tourism tax, hotel, restaurant, museum, car rental, when you rent the convention center, a portion of that goes back to our state. A portion of that goes back to city government. And those dollars are, we know, line item for public safety, infrastructure, etc.
Do you think, and this isn't meant to be an insulting question because it's not, because it's complicated. And there's also a lot of constituent pressure. You don't lose any votes going back to Northeast Indiana or Southwest Indiana. You don't lose any votes by needling Indianapolis.
Sure.
Right? So, and possibly gain votes by saying, hey, look, I'm going to stand up for Vanderburgh County.
Sure.
I'm going to stand up for Clinton County or whatever. Do you get the sense that they understand that? There's the, hey, we need to be vigilant that every other county doesn't get starved, but we also acknowledge that without the economic engine of Indianapolis, tourism, visitors, etc., this state's fiscal situation would be considerably different.
We do. We ultimately do believe that the Indiana General Assembly believes that and knows that. And certainly that shouldn't discount them from advocating for their own region, right? Where it comes alive is we know during session, conventions come and go. And that is emblematic and very visual in having someone from any county go, wow, okay, the capital city's buzzing. Mm-hmm. It's hard to find a hotel room. Sometimes for our elected officials, we have to really work hard to find them hotel rooms. And we like that. We like to see that bustling city because we know the dollars spread out across the entire state budget. But when we talk to our tourism counterparts in other major cities who happen to be capital cities, we know that we're not alone in the capital city gets everything perception. What about the rest of the state? So we always have to be cognizant of that.
How is the convention business, the tourism business, outstate, Fort Wayne, Evansville. They're not big. They're significant cities. Indianapolis is considerably bigger. Do you have much cooperation or conflict with their version of Visit Indy?
It's a great question. The Indiana Tourism Association, ITA, brings us together, and state tourism, the Indiana Destination Development Corporation, IDC, brings us all together pretty routinely to think about Indiana as a whole for tourism. What's nice is that the Indiana Convention Center is the 17th largest in the nation. Fort Wayne has a sizable convention center, yet we don't compete per se, right? We're not constantly juggling for business. There's other states that have multiple centers within their own state, within closer proximity, or event centers that would go toe-to-toe. We're able to say, you know what, amateur sports can be alive and well in Westfield at Grant Park. And we'll help you with some hotel rooms in Marion County, but Hamilton County is going to get the majority of it. And that's a good thing, because then we can shift and book something else down here in Marion County. Same thing for Fort Wayne. We've sent them leads, if you will, for business that might not fit within our books, and they've benefited. So I'd like to think we work exceptionally well, specifically with the oversight of this Indiana Tourism Association, ITA.
Okay, you're off the record.
Yeah.
Even though you're being recorded.
Clearly.
And I'm going to put this on the internet where it'll live forever. True or false? Gen Con is your favorite convention?
It is true for the following facts. It is highly visual. It's multi-generational. It's been here since 2003, and people have fun. The only time I'm able to say people vacation in Indianapolis is for Gen Con.
That's a good point.
We are a city that people take long weekends and escape or get a getaway, but we're not a vacation destination. The research shows that. With the exception of Gen Con, people will take 5 days and plan their summer travel to Indianapolis, Indiana for a vacation, not a getaway, not a long weekend, not a couple's getaway, although we get those.
Right.
So I love Gen Con for those reasons.
How many Harley Quinn outfits have you seen?
Too many.
They seem to be everywhere during Gen Con.
Games get launched at Gen Con. They just had record attendance. We have them safe and sound through 2030, and they had a record-setting attendance. It's part of the reason why we're growing the convention package. Not the only reason, but part of it. We just went out to Seattle, where they're based, met with their CEO and their executive team, and learned about how they want to continue to grow 8 to 10% in the next 5 or 6 years here in Indianapolis. So we pushed away Chicago, we pushed away other cities that wanted them, and we've got them safe and sound through 2030.
What makes Indianapolis the perfect place for a Gen Con?
Centrally located, walkable, and those climate-controlled skywalks where you can have events happening in each hotel, and then inside the convention center, and then inside the stadium. They've grown into the fact where they're inside the stadium. It's 24-hour gaming. We do love all of our annual conventions equally. Sure. And what's interesting is Gen Con locally has grown from, what are those geeks doing, to, wow, we really love them. And
you ever take your kids walking through the hall?
Oh, yeah.
Remember you gave me tickets so I could take my kids who were like in grade school, and they were just mesmerized.
It's fun to see. It's fun to see the excitement and the buzz, and that's just... But then you turn around and you got National FFA, and you've got 70,000 kids, aspiring leaders in the making, okay, from all across the country who come here every single October, November. They're behaved. And oh, by the way, when we talk to the Indiana Economic Development Corporation or Develop Indy, what a unique opportunity to have these visitors first come as a student. Yeah. And then they think about attending college and entering our workforce. You look at the trade show floor for National FFA, it's car manufacturers, it's clothing, and it's colleges and universities. They want those high school students to come to their university. So we get built in this audience of 70,000 future aspiring leaders who come here every year. And don't you think they have a positive experience and come back as a visitor or as a student?
Did the TV show The Big Bang Theory help accelerate Gen Con?
I think so. I think geek culture is in, and it has been, and studying is cool, and gaming is cool, and it's not just one-dimensional board games or two-dimensional or three-dimensional. People are getting behind games, and so gaming is cool.
We have a few more minutes on the Leaders and Legends podcast with Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer Chris Gahl of Visit Indy. Was the NDY, was that your idea? Who deserves credit for that? The NDY where you can stand next to it and form the eye on the street.
It was. Thank you. And it was an idea our team helped get around and put into place. These are the Indy Y sculptures that you stand to be the eye in Indy. We put them in place. We wanted them to be done by April of 2015 in time to host the men's Final Four. We didn't know that we'd be amidst the RIFRA crisis. So they came out at a great time, and we've lost track of the amount of people who have stood to be the eye in Indy. We're very thankful to Pacer Sports Entertainment and Mel Raines. When they did Bicentennial Unity Plaza, they said, could we pay for and fabricate another Indy Y sculpture? We said yes. There's one at the airport. We appreciate that to welcome our visitors. I saw Caitlin Clark stood to be the eye in one of her first road trips. That's what I was talking about is like earlier, like civic pride. If you haven't or you haven't in a while and you're listening, stand to be the eye and just use hashtag Love Indy and why you love Indy. We need your support.
You mentioned Mel Raines, and I immediately get giddy.
Yeah.
She's phenomenal.
She could work anywhere in the world.
That's right.
And she's rolled up her sleeves. And during her tenure, by the way, NBA All-Star, WNBA All-Star, and 2 back-to-back number 1 draft picks. That's a pretty good start to her tenure at the head.
Talking about Mel Raines, who I think is the CEO now of Pacer Sports and Entertainment. So I don't mean to put you on the spot because I've got a couple more questions before we get to the 5 questions, but when are you going to give me my juice about my idea about Indy? Can you do that where you just have the IND and then let people form the why?
I like the why. We've considered it. And those structures, those physical 1,000-pound structures are about $50,000 a piece to produce. And so we've got to think through how we refabricate those with the local designer.
Squeeze some money out of hoops.
That's true. That's true. I like the idea. You say the I, you're the why.
That's
I
right.
hear you. I know you've come strong with that.
You know what? I grew up in the era of the Village People.
I love it.
Let's talk about Caitlin Clark. She was on my list of topics to bring up. You had Reggie Miller, and then you had Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck when he was here. Certainly, Caitlin Clark has, if she's not ascended to that level, she is just a few inches below it. How has she impacted Indianapolis tourism and marketing? And do you see opportunities for Indianapolis to bring in conventions when the Fever are playing because they could possibly see her play?
The Pacer Sports Entertainment are studying the Caitlin Clark impact and the Fever impact, right? The team, and it's real, and I can't wait to hear what is uncovered. We have found when we've placed ads tied with her being drafted in Des Moines and other Iowa markets, they're clickable. When we promote that you can come see Caitlin Clark and the Fever play on weekends in Indy, from that fan base, they click and they come. We have seen an uptick in overnight stays timed with home games at Gamebridge Fieldhouse. We know that content on our website is highly clickable and has been more seen this year than in previous years. And so we know there's an impact. National TV games, more. With that sweet sounding word, Indianapolis repeated, and skyline shots. It's hard to put a value to that. Here's what I think I can't wait for the community to see, where does Caitlin Clark put her philanthropic tentacles? Where will she plant her giving and her community giving? If you think about Peyton and hospitals, and you think about Tamika, and you think about Reggie.
That's right. Tamika Clark is a phenomenon. But Tamika Catchings is not only a Hall of Fame basketball player, but a marvelous person and an incredible citizen of Indianapolis,
and could live anywhere and decides to stay here. And when they retire as players, or even during on the court, on the field, and they say, "This is where I want to put my philanthropic dollars and time and support." For Luck, it was Indianapolis reading and erasing illiteracy and book clubs and books and students and little people, and same with Peyton and Tamika. And I can't wait for Caitlin Clark in the next decade when we all go, wow, great championships and records and tourism wins and economic wins, and people are already wanting to come see our city timed with Caitlin Clark. What about when she donates and puts her philanthropic heart behind things, and all of a sudden the skyline changes and people are made better, and the marginalized are made better because of her philanthropic heart? That's like the tangential next level Caitlin Clark impact I can't wait to see.
You have been at Visit Indy during 2 monumental sporting events. One perhaps didn't end the way you wished it would have, and that's Butler versus Duke. What was it like? Sorry, Alan. put the razor blades away. I didn't mean to bring up a bad topic. What was it like as a Butler grad? Now you're in the Butler trustees and someone so interconnected with the school, yet also having to do a job helping promote the Final Four. What was it like when those two things collided?
It was so fun and then tragic. It was fun because the media storm on our city was real. It was like Hoosiers. It was like the movie Hoosiers being lived in real life. You had Bobby Plump, who attended Butler, the movie filmed here, and then all of a sudden the hometown hero is in the conference that shouldn't be here is coming to play Duke, right? And so the media storm was so fun to be a part of, and all the early shows and late night shows and the team and the homecoming, et cetera. And the morning of that national championship, I had a travel writer with me, and I took her to Plump's last shot, and Bobby Plump gave time to meet with her and talk about why he loved Indy and what to do. And we had a tenderloin sandwich, and he had his Butler shirt on. It was the day of the national championship. And the travel writer got all this great content, and she peeled off, and I said, "Bobby, what do you think?" And he gave me this giant hug, and he said, "I think it's going to be a buzzer beater." And it gives me chills still. I said, "Where are your seats?" He said, "Next to Governor Mitch Daniels." And I looked down, and there he was. And I've only watched that shot once, and it was live. I don't care to watch it again. I don't care how close it was or wasn't.
You were at the game, obviously.
I was, next to my wife, Catherine, who I met at Butler, and I sulked for days. And you have to remember, a couple of weeks prior to that, our Colts lost in the Super Bowl to the Saints. So it was like this double whammy of so close in so many weeks. But
I was at the Colts because I was working for the mayor. And as everyone knows, or people perhaps know, I've been a Miami Dolphins fan since Super Bowl VI, which is 1972. But I don't know that I've ever rooted harder for a team to win than I did for the Colts to win that Super Bowl. Because at the beginning of the fourth quarter, I got a text from Mayor Ballard that said, because we obviously weren't sitting in the same section, if the Colts win, get down here. We're flying home on the Colts plane. Oh. And I was beside myself for them to win. And of course they didn't. But yeah, you're right. That was a double whammy for sure.
Double whammy.
If you asked Mayor Ballard his greatest achievement, he wouldn't say the Super Bowl, securing the Super Bowl. And the foundation was laid before. Sure. But let's give him credit and a lot of others for winning that bid for the Super Bowl in 2011 or 2012. Yeah. 2012, excuse me. I've asked a lot of people, including David Frick, including Bill Benner, and lots of other people who've had a decades-long experience in Indianapolis. If in 1980, I would have told you that in 30 years, Indianapolis will not only host a Super Bowl, but completely redefine what it meant to host a Super Bowl, you would have said, and everyone's answer is, well, that's crazy. Yeah. Host a Super Bowl. What does that mean? How proud not only were you of Indianapolis, but also a native of Indianapolis, that it went off so incredibly well. And people talk about the weather, but the weather was lousy until game day.
Yeah.
What was that like for you, that snowstorm, metaphorical?
Yeah, no, it was so rewarding to just be a small slice of the pie that helped procure and worry about. And that was, you know what? The Super Bowl host committee led by Allison had a very sharp focus on multi-generational mentorship and leadership and emerging leaders that were able to flex and get into the arena and help plan that. So that's another, back to our first topic here of like mentorship. And that's another thing Indianapolis does exceptionally well is during these major events, we cultivate the new leaders and bring them on and give them a platform and access, and their ideas are heard and seen. And so there's a sense of pride as a younger leader, an emerging leader, that you could be part of something that was bigger. And, you're floating around and seeing Al Roker and Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon. And you're like, wow, these events define cities. And here's the thing, it gives civic pride. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the other thing is like we have these highs and lows. I even saw it with USA Swimming and the sports corps bringing the trials into Lucas Oil Stadium. We got excited for it. And then you have this lull that's down. It's like, what are we going to do next? And so fortunately, we have a pretty jam-packed calendar. The boost to civic pride when we host these major events are what I think is really the most special piece of them.
You mentioned that 1987 Mark Miles, who in my opinion is the greatest leader I've ever met, who didn't hold office. In 1987, he's the Allison Millington of the Pan Am Games.
Sure.
Fast forward 25 years or so, he's the CEO of the entire thing and of the Super Bowl committee, and has to do the presentation and all of that. So your example of mentorship and, hey, you get some experience here, then coming on down. Did the Super Bowl and the fact that it went well, did the Super Bowl help? Has it helped? And let me ask a follow-up right now. Has that effect diminished or evaporated in selling Indianapolis? In other words, afterward, where you're like, people are taking a stronger look, and then after 10 or 12 years, it goes away?
Yes. There was an immediate bump, immediate benefit, not only from prospective customers we hosted during the weekend and the game, who then ended up booking, because again, if you can host the Super Bowl, if you can host the Indy 500, we're confident we can host your meeting or convention. That has waned a little bit, not a negative. It's the fact that the Super Bowl is hosted every year, and at that point in our city's history, at that point in the perception of Indianapolis, that was an unexpected. And now we are even more of a sports-minded city with even a bigger portfolio of events, that it's waned a little bit, but not because it's a negative. It's just because it's almost the expectation now in a good way. But keep in mind, we've held on to the Combine since 1987 and are viciously trying to protect it for year in and year out, while other cities much bigger than us in population are trying to get it. But the NFL will often point to the Super Bowl. And one day, with the sports core and the Colts leading us, we'll probably get the draft. And it's probably because we've cut our teeth on a Super Bowl and the Combine. So the NFL's comfortable with our city.
So if someone asserted that Indianapolis came of age because of Super Bowl 46, you would say?
Yes, we turned the page, and it was further cementing what everyone else knows and what residents didn't believe. And I think you have these demarcations and these benchmarks. And so Pan American Games, yes. The Super Bowl, yes. I think the swim trials I think the NBA All-Star Game, yes. I think the swim trials continue to have that impact into the tourism world of attracting additional events and people who were incredibly wowed by what was taking place here in our city. Major sporting events drive brand appeal for our city, and the Super Bowl was no different. And it gave us this confidence as a community that we needed there in 12.
And it's probably more than any other event I can think of, the community was participating.
Yes.
The Final Four and other big events that are amazing and wonderful, population that actually is involved or gets to experience just a little bit of it is relatively small compared to the population of, let's say, Indianapolis or Central Indiana. That wasn't true at the Super Bowl for any of us who walked the Super Bowl village as it got closer, and it was so packed. And people were so happy and they were so proud of their city. That's what I thought. There's lots of reasons the Super Bowl is different, but to me, it was the fact that someone who lived in Irvington or someone who lived in Hallville or someone who lived in Pike Township who normally maybe doesn't go downtown says, you know what, I'm going to take my kids downtown and see what this is all about.
Yeah. And that's where you have the oldest sports commission in the nation at the Indiana Sports Corps, and you have their gravitas and their leading by design. These rights holders, USA Swimming, the NFL, the NCAA, we all think and worry about them. And you have to constantly renovate your ideas and your thoughts and your creativity. And because it's just every day someone's trying to take these. Every day someone is waking up thinking about how to take the NCAA's headquarters from Indianapolis, Indiana. Every day someone is waking up and cities are planning to try to extract the Performance Racing Industry Trade Show or FDIC or National FFA. Everyone is trying to replicate the convention package, the event standards that sports or medical or life science or technology conventions and trade shows have in Indianapolis. And if you're listening to this, it's real, it's competitive, and it's harder each and every year because cities are in this constant state of competing.
So tomorrow morning when you wake up, what are you thinking about stealing?
We got it.
Keep that to yourself. We don't want them to be prepared.
But listen, we've got our list, and every day we have sales teammates out on the ground in cities across the United States and otherwise, pitching Indianapolis into the future and what we will look like into the future, and starting a conversation or continuing a conversation, and we're winning more than we're losing.
We've reached the point in the Leaders and Legends podcast where we ask the same 5 questions of all of our guests. Chris Gahl, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
What was your first job?
Delivering the Indianapolis Star to my neighborhood in Pike Township.
You got to see Bill Benner's face and name all the time then,
I did.
Didn't you? What was your first concert?
Pink Floyd Division Bell Tour inside then the Hoosier Dome.
I was there.
Yeah, great show.
It was a great show, actually. It was really good. Number 3, if you could suggest any book for someone to read, which book would you recommend?
Essentialism. It is a book on how you block out some of the noise and practice and think about and worry about the essential few rather than the trivial many.
Number 4, if you could witness any event in history, be there in person as it happens, which event would you choose?
I would love to see Michael Jordan's game winner against the Utah Jazz. I know that seems very specific and not historically relevant, yet he was a hero of mine growing up. His dad died, my dad died. I saw him making it. I wanted to just associate with him, and that would be a moment I'd like to see.
Last question. If you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record just to chat, whom would you choose? Living today.
I'm going to go with President Barack Obama. I think sitting with him tonight with the imminent election and what he's been through would be a fascinating take. He also loves Hawaii, and I'd love to talk to him about that.
All right, you get a bonus 6th question. Because
I love it.
my jealousy of your good looks and hair are so apparent.
Given to me by my mom and dad.
They're beautiful.
Thank you.
Because you're beautiful, and your kids are beautiful,
Thank you.
and as is Mrs. Gahl.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in Indianapolis whose hair you're jealous of and would like to have?
Alan Bacon, one of the co-founders of Gang Gang. He's a Pike High School grad. He's a little younger than me, and he comes with a very strong hair game. It is substantial, it is stable, and it is something you got to see.
We need to have him on the podcast. I want to interview his hair. You have been listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Gahl Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, and the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. Our guest today has been Chris Gahl, Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for Visit Indy. And I'll say this quickly. If you don't get along with Chris Gahl, you need to take a look in the mirror.
Thanks for having me on, Robert.
Very few people are as respected and well-liked as you in this city. Thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.